death penalty as stated in the grounds asserted, bought preliminary hearing, if a second trial presumes innocence.
The death penalty sends the wrong message. We need to ask ourselves, why kill people who kill people to show killing is wrong? Life in prison is a much worse punishment and more effective than death. Killing the defendant will not bring someone's child, victim, back to life. Therefore, it's useless. The death penalty is useless. The death penalty is irreversible. Absolutely, judgments may lead to people paying for crimes that they did not commit. Thank you.
Dr. Michael Summers, who has a PhD and MBA and is also a professor of management science at Pepperdine University, stated that research shows that each execution carried out is correlated with about 70 to 75 fewer murders the following year. The study examined the relationship between the number of executions and the number of murders in the U.S. for the 26-year period from 1979 to 2004, using data from publicly available FBI resources. There seems to be an obvious correlation in that when executions increase, murders decrease. In the early 1980s, the return of the death penalty was associated with a drop in the number of murders. Throughout the 1990s, our society increased the number of executions and the number of murders plummeted. Since 2001, there has been a decline in execution, which has resulted in an increase in murders. It is possible that this correlated relationship could be more coincidence. So they did a regression analysis on the 26-year relationship. Further analysis revealed that each execution seems to be associated with, in fact, 71 fewer murders in the year the execution took place. We know that there is a simple but dramatic relationship between the number of executions carried out and a corresponding reduction in the number of murders. Capital punishment may be morally required not for retributive reasons, but in order to prevent the taking of innocent lives. Thank you.
It'd be nice to think our judicial system is totally infallible and completely confident that the death penalty decreases crime rates, but unfortunately that's not the case. Innocent people are convicted of crimes they didn't commit more often than anyone would like to admit. And in some cases, people who were later found to be innocent have actually been put to death. Hundreds of people have spent time in prison for crimes they did not commit. United States courts are supposed to be the guardians of justice, yet incorrect verdicts occur far too often. As we now have DNA evidence that makes it to where people are not wrongly accused, there seems to be a less likely chance to wrongly accuse. However, since then, they have had 20 people released being wrongly accused. Since 1989, the United States has used DNA testing to exonerate 225 innocent people after they have spent years in captivity. At least 123 people have been exonerated from death row since 1970s. Since 1973, at least 88 people have been released from death row. During the same period of time, over 650 people have been executed. Even more currently, as of July 9th, 2018, 130 DNA exonerees were wrongly convicted for murders. 40 of those cases involved eyewitness misidentifications, and 81 involved false confessions. Condemning the innocent makes a mockery of justice, robbing men and women of dignity, relationship, time, opportunity, and freedom. Wrongful convictions also endanger the public because locking up an innocent person means the real culprit walks free. Not only their wrong convictions, but the government has failed to prove that having the death penalty deters the crime from even happening. In fact, during the last 20 years, the homicide rate in states with the death penalty has been 48% to 100% higher than in states without the death penalty. When comparisons are made between states with the death penalty and states without the majority of death penalty states show murder. Thank you.
Time. Okay. They're going to take a 2-minute break to prepare for rebuttals. I will call you when you've got like 15 seconds left. So this team can go in this corner, this team can go in this corner.
gonna stay live. We'll stay live. Yeah, one. Yes. They just get nervous, and they don't think they're doing it. You know what I'm saying? They don't think they're doing it.
Yeah, but you're right. They're just, they all have it usually written in
We can add a lot of facts. We can add a lot of facts. They've done good research.
some of them are.
This is the third research project in a row for them. Just one right after the other. I wish more of the freshmen would have came this morning. I wish more of the freshmen that we did the mini debate would have came. Just because I think it gives them. Yeah.
Time's up. Come back to the table, please. Okay, we will now present the rebuttals.
According to criminologist and Stockholm Prize winner Dr. Daniel Mason, in his book Deterrence and the Death Penalty, that there is no evidence that proves that the death penalty affects the crime rate in any way. Even though it does not affect the crime rate, why would we want to get rid of it? Without the death penalty, criminals that committed heinous crimes would be living their lives in prison, being fed, and they would be given health care, which would all be paid by the taxpayers of the state. People in jail that have a chance for parole can be set free into society for good behavior. Why? They were trusted before. What makes them think they could be trusted again? I'm not saying sentence people that are charged with second-degree murder to the death row after murdering one person in a possible accident, but someone who finds no remorse in killing a group of people. Thank you.
Good morning. It was mentioned that the death penalty saves innocent people's lives, but according to Dr. Brad J. Bushman, that is wrong. There are approximately 3,000 people on death row, and there are approximately 3,000 people on death row, while there are 123 of them innocent. Can you imagine being an innocent person about to die for something you did not do? The death penalty sends innocent people to die, basically. It was also mentioned that the FBI Uniform Crime Reports show that states that use the death penalty have homicide rates up to 48 to 101% higher than the states without the death penalty. One reason why the death penalty might not deter the criminals that most murders are committed is because it's out of fit of rage. When someone is in an intense argument is when they rarely consider their consequences. No one who kills by permanent or temporary insanity
through jealousy, drug addiction, robbery, alcoholism, brain damage, chemical imbalance, rape, revenge, or feeling of no way out of rage, thanks to death penalty at the time of the murder. Thank you.
As they stated, the death penalty is cruel and unusual under the 8th Amendment. However, they rely on this provision because it is the only provision they can rely on. The prisoners are charged by the sovereign state with murder. They were afforded counsel and tried before a jury of their peers, twice. Once to determine whether they were guilty, and once to determine whether the death was appropriate. They were duly convicted and sentenced. They said that they used the DNA evidence to prove them, which we have the DNA evidence now, which can help us to not convict innocent people. This is obvious under the 8th Amendment, how they are not being cruel and unusual anymore with the DNA evidence. Thank you.
According to the Death Penalty Information Center, the average cost of a case without capital punishment involved is $740,000. For cases where the death penalty is sought by prosecutors, the average cost of this case is $1.26 million. In addition to the prosecution expenses, the cost of housing a prisoner on death row is $90,000 per year on average, then a prisoner in the general population. With the average length of time on death row at 15 years in the United States, housing a prisoner for execution may cost more than $1 million, more than housing a prisoner for a life sentence. There were 2,738 people on death row in the United States on July 1st, 2018. That's $3 trillion taxpayer dollars that are being put towards vengeful deaths. Thank you.
Alright, first of all, punishment must fit the crime. As Alice Tweed, who has a PhD in government and ethics, once said, we reserve the right to the death penalty in the United States for the most heinous murders and the most brutal and conscienceless murders. Some of these type of crimes is murder and genocide that absolutely deserve the death penalty, because the capital punishment system is a filter that selects the worst of the worst. The final point I have is the death penalty gives the family of the victim a sense of justice. Thank you.
It was brought up about the 8th Amendment, but the 8th Amendment states that cruel and unusual punishment is illegal. According to CNN News, on March 16, 2011, a U.S. manufacturer, Prospera, stopped producing the drug that is used to commit capital punishment in 2009. The countries that still produce this drug do not allow it to be exported to the United States for lethal injection. Without this drug, states were forced to make a new combination of drugs. In 2014, Arizona used a new combination of drugs for a lethal injection to execute Joseph Woods, who was a convicted murderer. After the injection, it reportedly took him nearly 2 hours for him to die. That sounds like that would be cruel and unusual. A state board reviewed later that the future executions would have to be conducted with the 3-drug formula or a single drug injection, but there was none to be had. In 2014, the Oklahoma Department of Public Safety reported an issue with a botched execution of Clayton Lockett in April 29th, 2014. Complications with the placement of an IV and the wrong type of drugs caused Lockett it took him 43 minutes for him to die. So you're trying to tell me that there's no cruel and unusual punishment of taking over 2 hours to die. Thank you.
I'm sure everyone in here is familiar with the famous serial killer called Ted Bundy. He escaped prison and went on to kill 3 more people. And I know everyone in here is saying, sure, 3 more people, that's not a lot. And that's not a lot. But when it comes to a life, 1 is a lot. He was connected to more than 30 murders. The point of prison is to put them in there and to rehabilitate and put them back into society. Are you telling me you want a person who has killed 30 people to go into prison and have a chance of rehabilitation and putting them back into society? The death penalty is not a lottery. We're not saying if you commit one crime, you might get the chance of death penalty. This penalty is reserved for the most heinous, brutal crimes. These are people who do not have a conscience. This is a long process as well. And along with that long process, the DNA evidence can help with that process as well to determine that they actually committed these crimes. Thank you.
The facade of justice that the death penalty has created in the American justice system has caused citizens to believe it is the best choice when punishing a criminal. While some believe the death penalty is a deterrent to crime, there is considerable information that would indicate the death penalty is no more a deterrent of crime than a life sentence of imprisonment is. According to William Bowers of Northeastern University, the death penalty brutalizes society and increases the likelihood of murder. The states in the United States that do not employ the death penalty typically have lower murder rates than states that do. The death penalty is not considered a deterrent because most people who commit murders do not intend to get caught, nor do they weigh the differences between possible execution and life in prison. According to former Texas Attorney General Jim Maddox, in his experience, those executed in Texas were not deterred by the existence of the death penalty law. There is no conclusive proof that the death penalty acts as a better deterrent than the threat of imprisonment. A survey of the former and present presidents of the country's top academic criminological societies found that 84% of these experts rejected the notion that research had demonstrated any deterrent effect from the death penalty law being in place. Once in prison, those serving life sentences often settle into a routine and become less of a threat to commit violence than other prisoners while in prison. Furthermore, most states now have a life sentence without parole. Prisoners given this sentence will never be released. Therefore, the safety of society can be assured without using the death penalty. As it would seem cheaper to execute someone rather than house, feed, and support a criminal, there are many unavoidable costs making a death sentence far more expensive than a life sentence. The costs result from the unique status of the death penalty within the U.S. justice system, as it is the only truly irreversible form of punishment. The Constitution requires a long, complex judicial process costing up to 18 times as much as a life sentence. Reverend Jesse L. Jackson, Senior President and Chief Executive Officer of Rainbow Coalition Incorporated, states, "Murder, always tragic, seems to be a more heinous and despicable crime in some states than in others. There are no objective rules or guidelines for when a prosecutor should seek the death penalty. It is a very arbitrary issue when a criminal is sentenced to death penalty in one county or state, while someone who commits a similar crime in another county or state is only sentenced to a life sentence. Until arbitrary factors like geography can be eliminated as a determinant of who lives and who dies, the death penalty should not be used. The death penalty alone imposes an irrevocable sentence. If there are mistakes while judging a case, nothing can be done to amend those mistakes after the execution. There is considerable evidence to indicate many mistakes have been made in sentencing people to death. Since 1973, at least 88 people have been released from death row on innocence. A study by Columbia University Law School found that 2/3 of all capital trials contain serious errors. In other cases, DNA testing has exonerated death row inmates. Here, too, the justice system concluded that these defendants were guilty and deserving of the death penalty. However, after finding the DNA evidence, these innocent defendants were released and spared. Sentencing a criminal to life in prison without parole removes the criminal from society, as does the death penalty. However, a life sentence...
Time.
Thank you.
Okay, they will take a 5-minute break to prepare their final argument. If they would shut up.
we had them all done, that kind of. I'll ask the judges what they think. They think we ought to give them a chance to redeem themselves. Go ask my kids what they. Go ask my kids what their. What your kids think? Yeah, what my kids think. Just ask them if what their interpretation of. See if they say anything about reading.
Each side is just presenting the position for that side, but they're not really.
Yeah, she shot an argument. That's an argument to keep it there. Because she said, it was one line, but she said, yes, innocent people do this. Why would we get rid of that? What are you doing? Did you not? And as soon as she said that, I kind of went, Shane looked right at me and he used that. Because I think we all three made the same face. She just looked at her and said, that's it, maybe just like that. I did too. Haley.
You have 30 seconds to wrap it up. McKenna, your group has 30 seconds to wrap it up. You don't have to come back yet.
We're gonna take it home. Take it home. Well, that's what I had.
Okay, they will now do their final rebuttal.
Okay, one thing that was really brought into place on their side was the cost. The cost of the death penalty isn't the actual execution of the murderer. That is the cost from all the appealings, the mistrials, and all that. The actual cost of the lethal injection is $525. What
before you even get to the death penalty, what I kept hearing was the murderers don't intend to be on the death penalty or even intend to be in prison. They don't want to get caught. So why murder in the first place? Why do such a heinous crime? But with all that being said, no one wants to see a botched execution. Those 2 executions were one in, I think there's like 1,500 executions that have been done. Those were botched executions. No one wants to see that. But those were bad. And the taxpayers, they're going to pay for whichever one they go for. So why not get rid of the person who is creating such heinous crimes and being like unfair to society? The main point is, why keep them around? Why not give them justice for the people who lost their family members, their friends? Because it's not a good thing. Who wants to see that person live a life that they took from someone else, an innocent person? No one wants to see them die. So a botched execution, it's a bad thing, but as far as I'm hearing, there's only been a couple of them, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Growing up, we were always taught that 2 wrongs do not make a right, but apparently that lesson stops whenever we want revenge. It has been proven on multiple occasions by eyewitnesses to executions that the death penalty is completely barbaric and violates the cruel and unusual punishment clause stated in the 8th Amendment of the Constitution. There have been multiple incidents where it has taken the condemned up to 2 hours to die. That is 120 minutes of gasping for air, 7,200 seconds of pure torture. Sure, most criminals on death row have committed crimes and deserve just punishment, but how does modeling the behavior that the death penalty seeks to prevent seem like an adequate solution? Brutally murdering a murderer will not bring their victim back to life. All it does is cause more pain for their family and show that the vengeful killing is socially acceptable. If revenge is what is so desired, incarcerate murderers for the rest of their lives. Having to sit for the rest of their lives in the same 4 concrete walls thinking about the crimes that they have committed would haunt a person more than putting them to death would. It seems that the death penalty is actually an easier way out for criminals. Not only is the death penalty a lesser punishment, it is also much more expensive. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, cases without the death penalty cost $700,040, while cases where the death penalty is sought cost $1.26 million. Maintaining that each death row prisoner costs taxpayers $90,000 more per year than a prisoner in the general population. You see, each prisoner on death row has the opportunity to appeal. According to the Bureau of Justice and Death Penalty Information Center, the average time from sentencing to execution is around 16 years. If no appeals are raised, that process can happen as soon as 6 months, but that rarely ever happens. Yes, criminals who commit crimes deserve to be punished, but killing is not the solution. Thank you.
Okay, the judges will retire for their judgment, and then they will present.
I would have started laughing in the middle. Oh, yeah.
Headache. Got sinuses.
People said that WeatherBug was issuing a high pollen warning. I'm so glad I don't have allergies anymore. Can we quit down on my allergies just a bit?
But he did that with them.
Yeah.
Kylie, you know,
Do they draw for names? How do they get on teams?
One class goes against the other. And then they pick their parts.
I'll get over it.
Oh, you used a lot of sources.
He's like, he gets himself.
And only two of them did the name them. Three of them did not name theirs.
Can I have notebook back?
Yeah.
So half of the class didn't do comments. Half of the class didn't.
You guys can embarrass yourself more than I do.
And actually, there were probably
I couldn't say any of the words.
3 or 4 of them that should have done comments.
I think, remember?
But
Let's drop
they
flowers.
couldn't pass the It's because all they did was first 3 years, they didn't know the basics. But of the ones that I think one of them for sure will have to take a remedial. Yeah. It depends on whether they really think about things when they take the notes. I would like them to take the notes again. I might maybe if they pass, they won't have to take that. While it's fresh in their brain. You just need to get his name on the screen.
what are you doing? Kylie, I read it on the same page and I wrote the same thing. I know. You know what? It doesn't have
Okay, let's quiet down, please.
I would like to congratulate, you guys did a very nice job. I thought everyone was well prepared. You all did obvious research. It's hard to stand up in front of your peers and present anything. So you guys did a really nice job. I was proud of all of you. One of the things that we talked about consistently was when someone makes an argument, the rebuttal is to directly answer that argument. And we didn't see a whole lot of that. So, yes, some of you did, some of you didn't. Please, whenever you're using words that you are not familiar with, make sure you know how to pronounce them. Heinous. And there were several others. But obviously, if you are quoting out of a book, and especially legal books, there's going to be terminology that you're not familiar with, that I'm not familiar with. So make sure you find out how to pronounce those words. I would encourage you to make more eye contact instead of just reading what your presentation was. in answering, we decided we were going to go with who. You both had great arguments. Both sides had great arguments. We decided we were going to go with the people who actually did more rebuttal, and that would be this side. So, you guys want to?
Well, I would say, with those of you who just sat and read your notes, slow down. When you just run it through, it sounded like a one big run-on sentence. That goes for both sides. And I guess I understand that you had only a week to do this, but when you're making your arguments, you need to make them contextual to what we're dealing with here. Somebody mentioned the UN Declaration of Human Rights has, and we're talking about American death penalty. The UN Declaration of Human Rights has no authority here in the United States. We never signed on to it. There's a number of other things that you guys talked in that completely out of context. And if you're trying to win an argument, you need to make it contextual, not just somebody else's words.
Especially those of you that were the rebuttal half of your team, you need to answer what the people said in the first place, instead of just giving a speech that you had prepared. If you're going to have a debate, you have to listen to what the other side says, and you have to answer what the other side says. You don't just stand up and give a prepared speech.
And I guess my question is, the only method of death penalty that was ever discussed here was lethal injection. Why weren't the other 5 constitutionally regulated methods of execution mentioned?
Because this is the one that's mainly used.
I would say, statistically, the most commonly used, because it's used more than anyone else, would be Old Sparky in Texas, wouldn't you? Not one time did you guys mention execution. In Kansas, the method of execution in Kansas hasn't been used since the 50s, is hanging.
You know, when they hung the murderers
Have
of the
you
Clutter
guys ever
family.
read In Cold Blood? The 2 people that committed that crime on the Clutter family in Holcomb, Kansas. They were the last people we executed in Kansas, and they were done through hanging. So expand upon this. I know you have time constraints, but you guys lost out on a bunch because you focused mainly on one, the most heinous, or heinous. But that should have been your focus.
I said it right.
I don't
No,
know.
you didn't. You really did. Yeah, you really did. Well, good job, guys.
Okay, thank you. Go to second hour.